Storage device issues and symptoms. Storage devices present unique challenges to us due to their nature. There are multiple technologies in use out there today. Now, some of these devices have moving parts, like our traditional hard drives, which means that they are more prone to mechanical failure. Others function like RAM, like our SSDs or our solid state drives. They plug directly into a socket instead of cables. And if they fail, there's nothing much we can do besides replace them. So the problems that we have with storage drives fall into one or three areas. The drive itself has failed, the adapter or the controller is bad, or the adapter and the drive are not connected correctly. So when you're troubleshooting these type of issues, look for loose cables. If these drives are external drives, there may be power supplies and that are not working properly, or they may not have enough voltage or wattage to carry the load of the components built on board as well as the drive itself. If you're experiencing intermittent problems with your drive over a period of time, run diagnostic software. There could be a problem with the drive and it shows up in the diagnostic results. And a lot of our drives have what's called status indicators or light emitting diodes. Um, these indicate or warn of issues as a status updating of ongoing activity. Storage drives normally have a type of activity indicator that blinks to indicate activity. This could either be the drive or the drives are either reading or writing information. Now, if the light is solid or does not come on, this may indicate a problem. Some systems have an indicator light in the event of a drive error or needs that it needs to be replaced. There may be a separate light that indicates drive failure or a problem with the drive. You'll need to look at the indicator lights and understand what they're trying to communicate. Now, some problems you may see that may be obvious, or you may hear rather, grinding, clicking, or scraping. The drive is damaged, it's failing. Get a back of that data quick. But again, sometimes you'd have to use the indicator lights to let them indicate as far as what the problem is and what's going on. Now, if you ever boot up your device and you get the message, bootable device not found, no one really wants to see that message. So these are some steps that you could follow to help troubleshoot this or narrow down what the problem could be. Now, if the drive is plugged in and working, the BIOS or the UEFI should detect it first, and then the operating system load. Now, the OS will load if that drive is recognized by the BIOS and the UEFI. If the drive is not found, first verify if the BIOS or UEFI sees it. Check BIOS, make sure it's listed in there. If it's not listed in there, you know you have a connectivity issue. Check the cables. Make sure it's the proper cable or it's plugged in all the way. The failure to boot means that the drive is not properly connected, seated, or recognized by the BIOS or UEFI. Again, check those connections first to make sure that that drive is connected and recognized by BIOS, or the drive may be bad itself. Check another drive to see if BIOS reflects that with the new drive. Now, sometimes the operating system will load, and you see that you may have missing drives in the operating system. Um, if the system boots fine, you can't find, and the operating system boots up normally, again, you may have drives that may be bad or missing or not listed. Check again BIOS to see if you see those other drives. Um, Also, you want to check the connection of the drive. If it's an external drive, you want to check to make sure that the power connection is good, or it could be a bad cable or a bad drive. If the drive is local, meaning inside of the case, again, check BIOS, check the connection, make sure it's seated properly in its connection. If it's a network drive, check the network path to make sure that path is correct. Also, in the network drive, there's an auto connect feature that has your credentials that you put in. Make sure that information is in there correctly, or re-put that information in and verify that it's auto connecting. Sometimes when that information is not in there correctly or not checked to save, it will not save and it'll lose that drive information. Data loss and corruption. A failing hard drive would exhibit symptoms such as data loss, very slow read and write times. These are symptoms of also a hard drive that is too full. If your drive are experiencing these type of symptoms, check the free space. If the drive does not have a minimum of 10% free, it'll slow down tremendously. As drives are mechanical devices, they will eventually wear out and fail. Always be prepared with backups of your data. With the price point of replacing drives, it would be easier and better option for you to replace the drive instead of repairing. Repairing could be very, very costly. If you're faced with a situation where that's the only way to retrieve your data is by getting a repair, that may be an expensive option for you. Again, traditional magnetic drives are not the only drives that fail. Solid state drives can stop working as well. And when a drive like this fails, all your data is lost in that situation. So it's good to have a backup. Always prepare and look for the long term of drive failure. So prepare before that happens with a backup. Sometimes we have a RAID failure. Our RAID will fail on us. Now, as far as when a RAID is failing or troubleshooting a RAID, you have multiple drives to diagnose, which adds an added challenge here. However, many systems have indicator lights, like we spoke about earlier, that may inform you of a failing drive in that RAID. Now, even though in RAID you're dealing with multiple drives, it's almost dealing with one drive because they work as one. Now, if your RAID array is not found in a system, try to narrow the problem down. Is it one disk or the entire system? If the entire RAID is gone, it may be the controller. You need to look at the controller. There may be an issue with the controller. Go into the RAID utility and see if there is a problem with the RAID in there. You may have to, worst case scenario, rebuild that RAID. And if in that event, all of your data is lost, if you have to rebuild that RAID. Now, there also could be, before that, other problems with just multiple drives in that RAID. It could be a problem with one of the drives. So, say for instance, if you had a RAID one, if you have one drive in that RAID that will fail, you would be okay because the other drive would pick up on of the data. Because RAID one would give you a better fault tolerance, which means that if one drive fails, you have the other drive to back up on. Now, if both drives were to fail, you would lose everything, but that would be rare. Now, if you're using what's called RAID 5, which is disk striping with parity, this takes a minimum of two drives that have to fail in order to lose the entire RAID. But before that happens, the failing drive would need to be replaced. In RAID 10, which is a mirrored stripe set, which requires four drives, as long as one drive in each of the mirrored pairs is functional like RAID 1, you should not lose your data. So this gives you options when you have your RAID, um, as far as when if one drive would fail versus a minimum number and so forth. But again, make sure you have a backup of your data. Since 2004, most drive manufacturers have been installing software that they put into their softwares that's actually like a self-monitoring analysis and reporting technology, and this is known as SMART. SMART monitors hard drive reliability and theoretically can warn you in the event of imminent failure. Now, you would have to use possibly third-party software to view this data because your operating system would not be able to parse this data initially. So you use a third-party software to read this data. Some drive manufacturers have the utility to view this data as well. So check with your manufacturer. So if you have a situation where you're worried about a drive and you can about its performance, you can use the data that Smart is giving you as a benchmark of its performance and track it over a period of time. And as you see those performance indicators starting to decline, you can prepare for a drive replacement or some other type of situation that resolve that problem. Input output operations per second, or IOPS. This is an industry standard for reading and write times. It's used to quote speed max or number of reads and writes for drives. Now, the IOPS, even though it's an industry standard, it may not reflect real life results because a lot of things may factor in here: the load, connectivity, and so forth. So it's a good gauge, but it may not. But results and manufacturers factors will vary as well. Now, as the nature of our drives will see them eventually decrease in performance and eventually fail if they're left long enough. It's good to use this information, like I said, as a benchmark, as a performance indicator. And once this starts to decline, yes, we can you can go ahead and make those adjustments and so forth. Now, there are also indicators in the IOPS that you need to be aware of. When you're looking at the speed or the rating of the IOPS, you may see that like traditional drives may be in a range from 55 to 180 IOPS, whereas solid states may be from 3,000 to 1 million IOPS. Again, these are ratings that how many read and writes per second that manufacturers use to gauge as far as the benchmarking of the drives and how well they perform. All right, in this lesson, we covered a lot of areas troubleshooting our storage and RAID devices. We talked about the light emitting diodes, the grinding and clicking noises that you may hear on your drives, what to do in a situation where your bootable device or the operating system is not found, data loss and corruption, RAID failure. We talked about smart, self monitoring analysis and reporting technology, and input output operations per second. Thank you for being a part of this lesson. I will see you in the next lesson.